Coast Salish peoples, specifically Nooksack and Lummi tribes, who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin throughout the San Juan Islands and the North Cascades watershed from time immemorial. On behalf of everyone here, we want to express our deepest respect and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors, Nooksack and Lummi tribes, for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. Next up is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next up is the approval of the agenda, and we have the agenda is written.
Yeah, no changes.
Okay. Entertain a motion to approve the agenda is written.
Motion to approve the agenda is written.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Good of the order. Brenna's not here to stop me, but good of the order.
Yeah, just a couple things for the good of the order. Last week, our high school principal, Mr. Duran, took 3 students to the Mount Baker Rotary Club to be acknowledged for their efforts, for being outstanding students, community members, and just great people all around. So those students were Savannah Gooch, Brady Bruland, and Wyatt Freeman. So kudos to them for representing the high school at the Rotary meeting. And the other piece is that next week, Mr. Frazier and I will be presenting at a WASBO webinar with the OSPI CFO about financial analysis and stability, about how to strengthen financial goals for districts. And we were pretty grateful to be invited to do that work, and we're excited about it. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Also, I forgot to note, Tammy, that Brenda is absent and excused. So next up is the consent agenda. Entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Information from audience. Natalie, you're up. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Natalie Chavez. Thank you for listening to public comments this evening. I just wanted to say that it was really disheartening just to have the majority of you vote for the school-based health clinic. And it's not a surprise to me. I knew that would happen. It seems to be the majority of the Washington State Department of Health. There's a lot of funding. As a matter of fact, you could probably put a medical clinic in all of your schools, there's funding for that. And Erica Lautenbach would just love that. I made a comment at the Whatcom County Council meeting, December 3rd, 2024. At some of the meetings in December, even last week, there was about 2 hours of public comments, community members going to make public comments. And in December, there was one night, there was like 2.5 hours of public comments. And I will read part of a comment that I made at the Whatcom County Council meeting on December 3rd. Quote, I made a comment regarding the overinflated Whatcom Health Department that grew from 79 FTE positions in 2019 to 152 FTE positions in 2024. Executive Sadhu made a comment, as he has done before, regarding how our health department receives funding from other sources like federal, state, and grant funding that is still negatively impacting our community. And the health department is not a priority to many members in our community. How is this negatively impacting us? A lot of this money is still coming from us taxpayers, and we are currently around $35 trillion in debt as a country, with having to pay approximately $1 trillion per year in interest alone. This is horrifying. And the health department positions are impacting our housing issues locally, because we are bringing people in from other counties and probably other states to fill some of these positions. And these unneeded extra health department employees are also taking some of our precious parking spaces downtown. Just because expanding all county health departments in Washington state and doubling their budgets by millions of dollars over the last few years is a priority to the State Department of Health and Governor Inslee. That does not mean that it is a specific county's priority, and it does not mean that it is our priority, unquote. And so I just want to reiterate, it's unfortunate that your community couldn't ask for like a clinic for your whole community. Like, why can't we get funding for like the whole community? Why does it have to be in a public school? Why does it have to be a school-based health clinic? Why are they going after the students? Why are they going after our schools? Why is Big Pharma doing this? Why is Merck providing millions of dollars and they're part of the School-Based Health Alliance to push these through, and they're the makers of the Gardasil HPV vaccine? To ask those critical questions. Why are they willing to do this for our students, but not for our community? You know, like, what motive is it? And then we had people making public comments last week at the Whatcom County Council meeting. There's crime rampant, there's housing that's needed, there's food that's needed. Food banks always go and request more funding. At one meeting, Executive Sadhu had said he'd be the first to approve that for, you know, if there was millions of dollars for the food bank or this and that. But this is just for this. We have to use it for this. So they have us by the balls. They're saying this is their priority. And so we have to take a look at that and ask these critical questions. Are those our values? Are those our priorities of Big Pharma, of Bill Gates and his psychopathic friends, in my opinion? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, we have our study session board discussion, and it's strategic plan goal 3, culture of care. And tonight we have Ian and Bridget to help lead that. Nick, did you want to start off the conversation first?
It's like you mentioned, it's one of the goal areas within our strategic plan. Within that, there's a bunch of objectives and activities that were planned to occur. Reviewing that would indicate some mixed success, I guess. So I think in order to best talk about culture of care in a more broad sense, is why I asked Bridget and Ian to be a part of this conversation, because doing item by item, it'd be pretty exhaustive. So, yeah. So thank you both for being here.
So, and then for the board members, I kind of wanted to plan this as both study session information from Bridget and Ian, plus some time for board questions, board discussion around culture of care too. So you two lead it off. Thank you for coming.
We apologize in advance. We're a bit of the coughing team, so.
You look sharp though, so.
What's that?
You look sharp. So.
Well,
we're trying to distract, right?
So is Ian's getting it? Or
Yeah,
getting it set up? I think one of the things that we all know about Mount Baker is that it cares, right? You're on campus, you're in the community, you're someplace in Whatcom County, Snohomish County, King County, you run into somebody from Baker,
Right.
and it resonates. So I think it's a great testament to the Mount Baker School District.
Okay. And so our focus today is to give you a general overview of the culture of care at Mount Baker. So we got about 16 or 17 slides here. Feel free to ask questions if you have them along the way. Bridget and I are just going to tag team this and kind of go through our presentation. I think maybe 10 minutes or so. Okay. All right. So are we all good online? Everything's all set?
Excuse my picture.
Yeah.
That's all good.
That's a Zoom function.
Now we're getting there.
So when we think of an overview of the culture of care framework, I just want to provide you some examples of what we're talking about here. In general, it emphasizes a safe and caring learning environment. We're always seeking to support students and their needs. We wanted to make sure we create educational spaces that are safe for our students, that nurtures social and emotional well-being. Along with that, it's important that our collaboration with our community, with our parents, teachers, that's all critical in our process of developing and maintaining a culture of care. And along with that is the dedication of resources to be able to do that. And that's something that's not just a Mount Baker thing. We rely on others to help support that as well and seek out ways in which to gather funding so that we can provide, an all-inclusive kind of tiered model of support for our students. Okay. We look at the culture of care in kind of three core components or foundational components. The first is trauma-informed care practices. I won't read through all of these. I'll just let you guys take a look at that. Our second component is SEL, so social emotional learning. And then as I mentioned on the previous slide, that importance of collaboration and community support. The idea is all three of these tie together kind of to help build that foundation of support for our students. All right, so Nick, you're just up in the upper right-hand corner there.
Sorry, folks.
No worries, that's all good.
I'm not trying to get rid of that.
So I kind of wanted to, not a worry. I wanted to share a little bit more about what we're talking about with regard to trauma-informed practices. So when you look up a definition of what trauma-informed care is, it's the idea of prepping staff to be able to support students in a way that we're ready for. It's kind of like universal precautions for trauma. It's not that every student has experienced trauma, but it's being able to prepare our staff to manage and support students who might be going through difficulties or have experienced significant trauma in their lives. So by having these kind of core sets of principles and skills, we hope to be able to provide those safe environments for students. So I'm going to kind of give a couple examples of what that looks like. And some of these things aren't, how do I put it? It's not deep learning sometimes. It's providing consistency. It's providing a safe environment. So when you talk about looking at your environment, so establishing a secure learning environment is essential for preventing bullying, violence, and other hazards. Clear rules and expectations, that consistency. We've talked with behavioral consultants, for example, on the importance of sometimes just the simplicity of a visual schedule in the classroom and how powerful that can be, how centering that can be for a student who may be anxious about what's happening next. So the same thing ties into predictable routines in the classroom. So rules, schedules, and so forth all help with reducing that sense of anxiety of what's next. I'm not sure what's happening next, which can promote that internal impact where they're stressed and worried. Okay. A few other examples of trauma-informed practices relate to focus of relationship building. Teachers are not just teaching, they're also establishing connections with kids. And when you are establishing connections with your students, learning is going to be easier. And when you add that to predictable routines, visual schedules, it just helps build that foundation. It's also important to be able to identify and understand what things may result in triggering a student, that may result in anxiousness, that you need to be able to focus on, in a supportive way. The other thing to acknowledge is being able to use empathy and validation when students are going through difficult times. If we're dismissive of those things at the wrong time, that can trigger a student, especially students who have been impacted by trauma. And then the final component there is collaborative classrooms. So the classroom that's authoritative, which is more like a democratic classroom as opposed to a system that's completely controlled by the teacher, that those interactions with students are important as well in a collaborative classroom.
And I think just to pause and talk about that relationship-focused interactions, when we think about students in the classroom, but it's not just the classroom, right? It's the bus driver, it's our custodial, janitorial staff, it's our child nutrition, it's every interaction, our front office staff, our educators, so that you can have a relationship with your bus driver that is going to be life altering. And we see that first kiddos see the bus driver the first and the last many times.
Any questions about trauma-informed practices and trauma-informed care?
I do have maybe question / comment. I think about some of the examples that you gave about the empathy and being aware of triggers and being relationship focused, and those seem very much focused on the work day or the school day. And I think about all of our staff And that emotional labor that goes into that relationship doesn't stop at the end of the workday, right? You carry that home with you, that, you don't stop caring about these kids because you went home. What do we do to help support our employees when they're carrying that extra work? It's not just the expertise of the job, but it's this care that can chase you home at the end of the day and make you worry about young people who are vulnerable.
And some of that you can't stop, right? That's the nature of the business we're in. But also those healthy relationships that are at school with colleagues, with trusted colleagues, that makes a big difference. Some of the learning that has gone on over the past few years around trauma-informed practices, there is an adult component to that as well. So, it's from what triggers me, but also recognizing how I can handle that differently and how I can kind of pack that up at the end of the day and leave it, or different activities to do that. And then we'll talk about this a little bit later. The professional development that we'll be doing in February is focused on adult SEL. So what are those practices that you can put in place for yourself, for your classroom as well? But we do recognize that the adult SEL is significant. They're shouldering a big load every day, and you don't know what's walking in the door.
That's right. And no one person is an endless well
Right.
of give, right? And so making sure that the folks who are taking care and creating that culture of care also are encouraged to self-care.
In the district, I'm one of two Crisis Prevention Institute trainers, so I help staff try to help de-escalate students and use strategies to support them. One of the things we take time to talk about is self-care. Wonderful. Yeah, and what I enjoyed about, we just had a recent training. What I enjoyed was some of the activities that we engaged in. It gave opportunities for people to share what those specific activities are. They ranged from, when I'm done with the day, I sometimes go home and play video games, and I have another person who runs miles upon miles. So whatever that activity is, knowing yourself, knowing what you need to be able to disconnect, to be able to find your own time to fill your own bucket, so to speak, is helpful. Anyway, just wanted to add that.
I'm glad to hear that that's sort of a wraparound, that it's not just focused on the students, but that culture of care is everyone.
And our principals do a fantastic job of recognizing that.
Awesome. That's wonderful to hear.
Other questions? I had one, what progress have we made to ensure that each child has a meaningful relationship with at least one adult? It's something I brought up before, but how are we doing with that?
Can we attempt to answer that on a later slide? Can we come back to that?
No, that's
show you
fine. I
some of
just
the
wanted, I was thinking
examples of what those are?
the interactions, but as where it fits in.
Okay, but I don't want to, we will get to that, I think.
Yeah.
Once you see one of our graphics, I think that'll give you some of the answers.
Okay.
All right.
All right, and we know that social emotional learning is critical for student success. And that is similar to, trauma-informed practices. It's that consistency, it's knowing what to expect from the adults and from the classroom setting, academics as well as behavioral. This is what you're referring to, Andy?
This is what I was
Okay.
referring to. So Russ, your question ties in directly to our MTSS tiered model of support for social emotional services for kids. So this triangle outlines what at Baker we do to support the social emotional needs of our students. So at the bottom of that foundation, you see the word all. So all of our students have access to one or more of those activities there, depending on their grade levels. And at that, we have Character Strong, so our SEL curriculum, We have morning meetings that occur at K-6. So those are opportunities for students to develop those relationships with teachers. Morning alternative thinking strategies, that's our SEL curriculum at our gen ed level. And then we also have at our junior high, we have base camp and pride temperature and wellness checks, grades 7 through 12. You know, some of the things that aren't on the list that have an indirect connection to it, or like a direct connection, is their activities and after school activities, sports, drama, things like that.
Club Fridays for
Club
junior high and
Fridays.
high school.
Yep. So there's many things that are not all listed here, but the idea is what's our core components for SEL supports.
So you could, if I'm picturing it right, you can move, children are identified to move from all to some to few, and that would be one of the of those circumstances of a child who needs that extra relationship.
Yeah, that's spot on. So the second tier on that triangle is the sum component. That's where if you're looking at 100 kids, 10 or 15 of them would need some type of additional support. That can be tied to attendance. It could be lunch bunch at the K-6 level. It could be teams getting together and discussing concerns to figure out next steps to support students. That may involve individual or small group counseling. That's short-term, kind of triage kind of things. And then we also have family service coordinators in our district where they may be linking parents, students to resources as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about FSCs or family service coordinators in a little bit. On the top of that triangle is our few. So our kids who need intensive services in a variety of different ways. Some may require meeting with a mental health support specialist directly, receiving intensive one-to-one therapy on campus. And we also have the benefit of having outside agencies provide mental health support specialists for us as well. And they come onto our campuses. That's one of our barriers that we identified a long time ago, was transportation, having our families be able to access services. And so we started figuring out ways to bring services onto our campus to help reduce that barrier for many of our families. So that's a snapshot of the tiered model, Russ, that relates to your question and how we go about providing services for all.
And I do know an activity schools have engaged in is where they put the student pictures up and the adults, go through a process and determine who they're connecting with. Right. So something that's really visible and tangible and really awareness building as well.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's kind of where I was first introduced to the whole concept of making sure that no child falls through the cracks. Those that sort of sneak around the edges are the most likely to fall through the cracks. They don't, particularly if they don't have disruptive behavior.
And I think that's one thing as we learn more about social emotional needs is you might be disruptive and that's filling a need. You may be quiet, that's filling a need, but everybody is different. And we can't make that generalization.
Yeah, and I think, Russ, what you're referring to as well is when research was first emerging out of the adverse childhood experience research, or ACEs, they said one of the clearest things we can do to help mitigate those outcomes is at least one loving adult relationship at school. And to Ian's point about what he talked about being trauma informed, it's like that universal thing. If we know that some students have trauma in their background, and even if we don't know they have trauma in their background, if we make concerted efforts to build relationships, so that way at least every student can name at least one adult that cares and loves for them, then hopefully we'll be meeting what research is indicating is going to help those students be successful.
Do we see that or track that in our data? Right? Do we look at the students more closely who are tier 2 and tier 3 and track their success to see if our supports are working?
I think about our care teams or our student support teams where they, at the school level, they're identifying the student need, they're determining interventions or best next steps, and then making that plan. But as a district kind of warehouse of that information, we don't have that in place.
You know, I think it varies too whether that tracking and that data is qualitative versus quantitative, right?
Right.
So if we're looking at, students who, maybe they're expressing externally loudly, we might track that based on intensity, duration. Or if it's a student who's withdrawing, that's going to be more anecdotal data.
Well, the role that Base Camp Pride program plays in terms of continuity over time and that ability to notice things. So this is important, I think.
Because they have a consistent adult. over
Yeah.
there.
What's the lunch bunch?
So at elementary, the students come together and the counselors work with them. And at Harmony, Jane rotates through all the students and they come together and they just have a small lunch and, talk about friendship or whatever might be
Okay.
surfacing.
Okay, cool.
Sometimes they're more focused if necessary, like a
Right.
grief group,
Yeah.
something like that.
They're authentic conversations, but they may not necessarily be scripted or.
Right,
But it's just, it's
Time together.
adult. Yeah. Any other questions about this slide? All right. So another aspect to SEL learning and support as a part of culture of care is addressing barriers to learning. And one of our major ways of doing that is tied to the work of our family service coordinators. So we have basically we have 2.5 family service coordinators. We have somebody who's part-time and 2 others that work every day. And they split their time across different buildings, supporting staff, students, and parents in small and big things. So at the beginning of the year, linking them to supplies, accessing backpacks, other needs that they may have. If students need shoes, those kind of things will address. They support our families who are experiencing homelessness. That's what McKinney-Vento is about. And so we're a part of a Whatcom consortium. So it's all the family service coordinators in Whatcom County working together to help support families experiencing homelessness. And that setup is pretty substantial in terms of how we interact with our families, because many of our families will temporarily move to a neighboring district, and we try to keep them supported here whenever possible in their neighborhood school. Other things they do, they'll support families who have foster care, kids in foster care, or relatives that are providing support to grandkids, things like that. We'll address medical needs. We've helped families access resources to get glasses, to get their hearing tested, accessing health insurance. And we've already talked about the mental health support, but we'll also be focusing on parenting resources. One of the things I was proud of early on was it was interesting with the level of support that our family service coordinators have provided, have gotten out to the community, and we've had situations where community members who may have had a kid come through our program or graduate from Baker, but no longer have kids in the program, they'll call and ask how to access resources. So it's a good thing when we're able to help our community members as well.
Are these family service coordinators employees of the school district?
Yes.
And that interaction with, I guess, parents, does it happen at the school or on the phone?
It can be through the phone. Yep. Yes. All the above. Phone calls, emails, catching a parent when they're dropping off their student. It could be a home visit. It just depends on the situation and need. Yeah.
And how does the referral process work? Like, how does a family service coordinator get connected to the students and families that need? How do we identify that?
I'd say in a variety of different ways. They do have a little flyer. They have a part on the website as well. So we try to get that information out to families. Our teachers know about our FSCs. Our FSCs do a good job of communicating to our staff around their role and helping connect with teachers to help connect with families. So it's a variety of different
So
ways.
self-referral, teacher referral.
Paying
Yeah.
attention, right?
Yeah.
Their eyes, they're out there. They're seeing things, they're noticing. There's not a day that goes by that there's not a conversation about,
I know
this little piece of the puzzle or
Yeah.
this.
Over the last 3 years, 1 in 15, 1 in 16 students are experiencing homelessness in Mount Baker in some capacity. That's a pretty substantial number. Other things you can read on there, but food, basic needs, that is another important component as well.
Holiday assistance around Thanksgiving and Christmas, robust from community donations.
They're a very responsive community. It's amazing. We're 600 square miles in size, and yeah, it's a great community. Great communities, I should say.
Yeah.
Okay. The third part of our discussion today about culture of care is agency collaboration and family engagement. So we're just going to cover these four other components next. So connecting parents to school. So we do that in a variety of different ways. First, we have parent advisory councils. So we have a small contingent of families who are of migrant status. And so we work directly with families to support their needs. And we have there's a federal grant that's tied to this, Title I Part C, that assists us with the support to our migrant families and students. So we meet with them quarterly, connect with them actually sometimes monthly, to connect and support them to resources and needs. And they help support the work we're doing by they're almost kind of our guides as well to how we can best support migrant families. We also work with the Nooksack tribe through a parent advisory council. That one's kind of getting established, and we have a Title VI grant, or Indian Education Grant, provides a small amount of money to help support Nooksack students, actually any American Indian students here at Mount Baker. And we meet with the Nooksack tribe. We work with parents of the Nooksack tribe to help influence how we can support their children, both with regard to attendance, academics, engagement, those types of things. So we have kind of formal processes related to those groups, and we also do a variety of other things related to evening weekend events. Last year we had a Latino night as a district. We also had curriculum nights at our elementaries. So the KEHE is our elementary schools, Kendall, Harmony, and Ackley.
Is there another plan to have Latino night?
It's in the works. We've generally done that in the spring.
Be nice to get that message to the board.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Get it on our schedule.
Science fair.
Yeah, it just, every school has different types of outreach. Depends if it's a science fair or, books and breakfast, different things that work well at their schools. And some of those are very traditional. Got the different carnivals and events that happen as well. So always well attended.
Well, I like that. It seems like, it's kind of directly aligned with the educational component.
And we wanted to put a variety of things in here to explain. It's just culture of care. It's not just one simple little thing you do. It's broad, it's expansive, and it's ever moving. We need to adjust to the needs of our students and our parents. Well, we also just listed on there attendance meetings, community engagement board, just to support families who might have kids who are struggling to attend school. We want to be supportive in our efforts to get kids to school. And then just want to acknowledge our PTOs as well, whether that's Booster Club, PTAs, or PTOs. Those connections that our principals make with PTOs is important. And that PTO should be a voice for how schools are supporting kids as well. Okay.
Another part is that we work with our other school districts in the area. So I think we talked about earlier this year, the safety with I Love You Guys. So that's now a countywide plan, which will make a huge difference for students if they're transferring from schools, but also just for that response from our sheriff or fire departments. County Mobile Response Team, that's a team where there's specific members in the district throughout the county that have been trained. So when there is a crisis, a school can continue to function and a team goes in to support the work there. And that has been used, unfortunately, many times, but it is a system that works very well. And we've been the recipient and we've also been able to support other districts with that. Stronger Connections Grant.
Yes, so part of our ways in which we access resources, we partnered with Bellingham, Nooksack, Meridian, I think it was 5 districts who we wrote a grant together. And from that grant, we were able to access funds to bring in more mental health support services to our district. So we have this grant's in year 2, it's a 3-year grant, but it does help us provide 3 more days of services for kids, our tier 3 level SEL services. And then I mentioned in the previous slide, our Welcome Homeless Consortium. That is also a state grant. It's a 3-year cycle, and that is written with all of the school districts in Whatcom County. That helps provide some funding to support our family service coordinators, and it's our coordinated efforts to support our families experiencing homelessness. And I just like stating that we've had calls from the state who really like our consortium process. Like not all counties are able to do what we're able to do, and being able to have this collaboration and connection with FSCs in every district. And it's nice that we're 45 minutes apart from everybody, so it's relatively close. Whereas maybe in Eastern Washington you couldn't do it if you got 6 or 7 districts and they're hundreds of miles apart. Having grown up over in Eastern Washington, I know that it's a little more challenging to put that together.
And I'd say the same for the County Mobile Response Team.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's definitely a model. They're both state models.
I do have a question.
Oh, yeah.
So you mentioned that 1 in 15 of our students have experienced homelessness, and then we've got this homeless consortium. Let's say a teacher or a staff member identifies a student whose family seems to be experiencing homelessness. Can you walk us through just really briefly what the process of supporting that student and their family might look like, or what it might include, just so I have a better way of understanding?
So first and foremost, we'll receive some information that could be from a bus driver and from a teacher or principal, or directly the parent contacting the FSC. It's not always that easy. Sometimes it's a neighboring district who finds out about a family who is evading or dealing with an issue and they had to move. So once that contact is made, then our FSC will reach out to that family, determine if the family actually meets the definition of homelessness. And if they do, we'll figure out what their needs are. And in some cases, we have to do a determination on how to best support the family. Let's say it's a young student. It might be better for that student to attend school where they're currently residing, or it might be better to figure out ways to work with the transportation departments in both districts to bring the student back to their neighborhood school. All those things vary based on the age of the student. For the most part, I would say 90% of the cases, we're always trying to bring students back if there's not a lot of barriers. We've had situations where a student would be on a bus for over 2 hours each direction, and we have to ask the question if that's really the best decision to make. So our FSCs are really good about doing that. They're seasoned vets, and so they work with families to figure out what's best.
What's it, 2 hours on a bus? Is that our bus, or is that like a bus to a point?
Really
and
good
then another
question.
bus, or-
Very good question.
All of the above.
Yes, it could, yes. If we have a family that's in Blaine, it's very complicated to coordinate getting a Blaine bus and a Mount Baker bus to work.
Right.
With schedules, timelines, it's difficult. And students who are experiencing homelessness, they should be at school at the same time everybody else is. They have a right to have a full school day just like everybody else. And those are the challenging situations where you have to ask the difficult questions. Is it worth it to try to balance that out? Having a student get up at 6:30 and get home at 6:30 when they're in first grade, right? That's not common. I mean, it does happen. That's a minority case. Most of the cases, we have families who are doubled up, and they're living in them. And that's when we can manage that a little easier. That's the challenge of working with another district and their transportation limitations and our transportation limitations working together. And it's a good plug for Suzanne and the hard work she does in the transportation department, because I mean, I joke about all the things the requests I make to transportation, because I burden them sometimes with trying to figure out how to manage.
And that falls under the McKinney-Vento, right? I don't know if Ed or other folks are familiar, but there's a law protecting homeless students, so I'm busing students from here back to a home district. Is that required by law?
That's required
It's,
by law.
so it's not just something we're doing.
Understood,
Yeah.
yeah, we're required.
But you might see, you might be in town or just in another community and wonder, why is there a Mount Baker bus?
Up in Blaine
Yeah.
or wherever.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
or Ferndale bus coming out here, but
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
could be part of the why.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's easy where, let's just say it's Cedro, we got the AM, can you do the PM? Yep. And then it's done.
Mhm.
Problem solved. We don't have to worry about connecting. We just do trade, split the costs, and off we go. Okay. It's work I'm passionate about. I love what our MBSDs do, helping reduce those barriers for families.
Yeah, that's important.
It is. Collaboration with county agencies as well. We want to acknowledge that. So we work with our Whatcom County Health and Community Services, previously known as the Health Department. Because of actions related to the mental health tax fund started in 2010, that 0.1%. The county was very astute in figuring out ways to be proactive to support students, and so they gave a small percentage of those funds to the 7 school districts. And when I brought a team together way back when, it's been 15 years, and we talked about what do we do with these funds? How do we go about how do we support our students best? And that's where the conversations around limitations of transportation for our families, how do we bring resources out to our schools? And that's where, and so we fund a mental health support specialist to service our kids who have tier 3 needs in the social emotional arena. And then the work that's been going on with the school-based health clinic as well. They're tied to that support that we're trying to move forward with here as well.
So the mental health support specialists are employees of Mount Baker.
We have 2.1 FTE of mental health support specialists funded in a variety of different ways. So the Stronger Connections Grant,
I see.
some of the funds tied to the Whatcom County Health and Community Services Department. Yeah,
It's not a specific employee, as much as it is a contract.
we have 2 part-time and 1 full-time.
Okay.
And then I think another part of that question and answer is that we do have outside agencies coming in as well.
Right. Yeah, and are those people based on the main campus here?
We have a day at Kendall, a day at Harmony, and a day at the junior high school. Yeah. The pandemic impacted the really robust services we had, and everything kind of took a pause. And we were working with Compass and CMAR, and it's been a slow go because of the need out there for mental health services. They were struggling to hire staff. But everybody had full-time caseloads, and they couldn't bring more people on. So, but it's starting to come back. It's taken a little while, but we've really coveted the relationships we've had with CMAR and Compass in terms of the direct services they can also provide on our site to support our students who are going through some really challenging times.
I've definitely heard from folks in the community who are looking for private mental health support for young people that it's really hard to find private counseling, that there's wait lists and access is limited. And so the fact that we can provide that here at the school is just one more way that we can get our students support that they need.
It is important to note that some students require more intensive services than we can necessarily provide. Not all. We cover a good chunk of needs here, but sometimes the need is profound and more dedicated off-site services might be required. Yeah.
So on the school-based health clinic, the mental health supports there, if we identify a child that needs those and they're working through the process, how long would they wait before they start some sort of treatment program?
We've promoted that in some situations when it's a triage thing going on, it might be immediate if it. If
Oh, so
there's a-
like even the same day?
If a student's coming in and they're really upset and crying and that we need to provide some type of service just to get through the situation. That doesn't happen all the time. That's again triage. But for the most part, our mental health support specialists have caseloads. They service kids throughout the day. There is a referral process for that. That's also why we have CMAR and we used to have Compass. We don't have Compass out here on our sites right now. But that's why we also work with them because our need outpaces the services we can provide. So with CMAR out here, they're another string from which to support our families. And the nice thing about CMAR providing mental health services is they can sometimes provide that over the summer, whereas that's services that we cannot provide. Our services are during the school year. So CMAR is able to do something more extended.
Is the mental health support specialist in the school-based health clinic or on campus, or is that two separate things?
Good question. It's my understanding that right now we have CMAR supporting in different ways, but once the health clinic would be established, that they would provide a full-time mental health person. But I'm behind on that info. That was what was initially discussed in the past. I believe that's still going to happen, but I can't.
That would be in addition to the 2.1 FTEs.
I don't know if that's going to happen.
Okay. And then you also said our need outpaces the services that we're able to provide right now. And I was going to ask you about this. Do you have a sense of how much need is not met?
I couldn't give you that specific information. Our school teams manage that at the local level, right? They look at the school-based teams. Care teams, SSTs, there we go.
I would
Brain freeze there.
I always like to have those data points for advocacy.
Yeah.
Right, that these are, and we're working hard to get here, and here's the gap that still needs to be addressed.
Right, and you think about that in the sense of early intervention, right? So what are we doing? Granted, the need is going to be there for K-12, but what are we doing at that K-3 grade level so that we can support students who need to learn how to emotionally regulate? And how do we support those parents with the skills that they need as well?
Yeah.
So there's always going to be a need. There's always going to be, more than we can, in a school can provide. And I think sometimes that's what we need to also be aware of, is using the resources that are in the community. Because we are school, but you also have to be able to access your learning. And if you're just in a world of hurt, it's gonna be hard to learn.
Yeah, if your basic need, what Maslow's hierarchy,
Yeah.
right? If your basic needs are not being met, you can't get to that higher cognitive functioning that impacts academics.
And that variable is safety.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't feel safe. Yeah. The other thing you mentioned, data. So to this point, this school year, so far, 11% of our students have received some form of mental health services. So
And that's district-wide then.
it's district-wide, general number, yeah. Families below the poverty line, 52%. Families experiencing homelessness, 1 in 15. Families or students requiring tier 3 levels of mental health supports, 11%. We have needs.
You said 52% below the poverty line.
Yeah,
That's district-wide.
it's district-wide. Generally first or second in the county, unfortunately.
And you said 11% was tier 3?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's also a testament to our staff. Our teachers do a good job of identifying need, our counselors, our mental health support specialists, our FSCs. It is a team approach. And it's, again, I oversee, but they're the ones doing the heavy lifting, identifying students who are struggling to be able to focus in class. Yeah. Baker Community Coalition. I'm less involved with Mount Baker Community Coalition, but Mount Baker as a county agency that helps support our families. They've been instrumental in. Have you been attending? You have no. Yeah. I don't have too much to say at this point, but Opportunity Council was involved with getting the East Whatcom Regional Resource Center built. I was involved in those discussions. Actually led I facilitated a discussion in the community about what the building could be used for. We had about 150 people there. It was great to be a part of that. I see the EWRC develop and act, provide services for our families that's local. Yeah.
And you're familiar with Roots of Empathy,
Mhm.
targeted at our third grade students, and that has certainly been successful. Continue to be. I'd also like to talk about a few other outside agencies, like when you were talking about when a student hits a crisis level, right? We can do some triage, but there's other organizations that we call in countywide that are very supportive and very responsive. And again, that goes back to relationships that we have with outside agencies, because they know that culture of care out here from Mount Baker. It is when you're asking for help, there's a reason.
I'll just call out Blue Skies. Jamie Smeal, who you've seen in our meetings, is the president of that organization.
Oh, okay.
Volunteer organization, and does support a lot of homeless students with getting them clothes, backpacks,
Computers.
shoes, computers. And they do really great fundraising, like dinners and things to yeah. That's a Mount Baker alum in our district, students in our district, who's giving back helping to give back to the community in a really wonderful way.
So on programs like Wild Bird, what's your sense of the percentage of children who would otherwise be without food that are covered by programs such as Wild Bird? I mean, is it
It's significant.
fully meet the need?
We could get that data to you, but it is significant.
Yeah, that would be interesting to know if there's still unmet need after the variety of programs here, plus the food bank and food stamps. And
The reason why I find such value in Wild Bird, I mean, we have some students who extended breaks are stressful, and they're stressful because of a lack of basic needs that aren't able to be addressed at home for whatever reason. And so, food security is a big one, and knowing we can provide additional sustenance like that is important.
mhm. If you could get, I would appreciate the information, because I talk with people on both sides of the fence. People who need the food and people who have far more money than they give a dream of using. And that information is useful both sides.
Yeah. Talk about Roots of Empathy, the ESD, Educational Service District, we partner with them for behavioral, not behavioral health, but intervention and prevention specialist. And she is located here on the secondary campus, but just this year we have started where she is working with a group of 7th and 8th graders, peer-to-peer mentors, and they are they've gone through training and a lot of learning and a lot of group work, and now they're delivering lessons at our elementary schools at 5th and 6th grade around digital literacy, peer pressure. So, and it just started this week and it has been successful. It's really cool.
I didn't know that. That's
Is
Everything
that,
came to this meeting.
It is. There you go. I learned something new.
Yeah,
That's
it
really
is
cool.
fantastic.
is that focused only on substance abuse?
The work that Shauna's doing with high school students is intervention and prevention. The work that she's doing with her peer-to-peer mentors is much broader than
Mhm.
that. It's about healthy choices, healthy
Right.
lifestyles.
Mhm.
We also listed OSPI on here just to identify some of the grants that we pursue, that not all districts get. Some of these are competitive. The work that's gone on with Megley and the 9th grade success grant, helping identify students, that 9th grade year, which is so critical with their family classes there. The risk increases exponentially. So trying to help focus services, interventions for 9th grade students is important. And our outdoor ed grants as well.
And I just want to go back up to ESD. One more item was we work with them regarding threat assessments. So if there's a serious situation, there's a team that has been trained, our administrators have been trained on how to proceed through that, but then we can also consult with them. And they are trained, that is their wheelhouse in what they're doing.
Mhm.
So having that ability to consult with them to make sure that steps are taken correctly happens on occasion. And then also with the ESD, when we come back together in February and we're doing teaching and learning work, we're gonna introduce you to an individual we've been working with, Casey Knudsen, about teaching and learning.
Just reemphasizing our 3 components: the trauma-informed care practices, SEL, collaboration and community support. And our work moving forward, we're seeking to expand the culture of care in the strategic plan, hopefully next time around. Maybe add more data points to that, right? Make it more tangible. And then also just our school improvement plan focus as well, to ensure that it's being a part of our support at each school.
So you all imagine that this part of the strategic plan is something that we want to roll forward, likely.
In some form or fashion, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. Okay.
Not a checklist.
Mhm.
And that's it. Thanks for your time.
Other questions or comments? Jason?
Just comments that was a lot. I guess I never really paid too much attention, I guess, to say, could you send that slide, can you email that, your slideshow out, just read some more and process some things. I like that when you get them after seeing it and go over it again. So, yeah, real no comments other than that was great and a lot to think about and look into things as moving forward. So it's a lot to think about. We think of the school-based health clinic as a kid that falls at school or sick at school getting taken care of, but there's a potential of a lot other really good options for mental health and other things that you often forget about until it becomes a problem. So that's good.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't my strength or my area of expertise, but I appreciate that we've got people looking after this and working on it. Mostly interested in where it lines up with our educational goals, and I like to see where it's, helping in that area. Obviously, I'm always thinking about finances as well and how things impact that, and just wanting to make sure that, while working on these things, we're also thinking about just our general students and academically and pushing it forward, and hopefully those things are aligning.
And I'm assuming you saw throughout this that with all the agencies we work with, and some of those are tied to funding. It's something we can't do this as well, right? If we don't have those partnerships, and some of those are critical, and sometimes it's grant related, because the grant funds go away, right? So being able to maintain this, we have to be continually seeking ways to seek out funding and so forth. Right? Yeah, those partnerships are key.
A lot of really important work
Thank you.
going into all of this. I appreciate all of them. And guys, you know me, I love to see the data. I want to see that, yes, look, it's moving the needle, right? And you all see that, I think, in the day in and day out, but we're sort of in this high level view, bird's eye view here on the board, and don't get to see the day-to-day reactions or impacts on those students. And so that's partly how it makes it meaningful for us, I think.
a lot of celebration.
Mhm.
Yeah, a lot to celebrate.
Yeah, Phil was very well prepared. I had written a number of questions prior to this meeting, and you were right. I should have just listened. So I asked the first one, but the other ones you answered before I got to them, except for, I did want you to walk through at least kind of at a high level, both for the very young kids all the way up to high school, anti-bullying efforts, whether it's, it's part of it, I'm sure is social emotional curriculum, but staff monitoring, intervention, how do we, it's a problem that's been with us as long as we've had children together. And I'm not thinking that it's one that's an easy nut to crack, but if you can kind of help me understand what are some of those efforts that we do that to address that uniquely.
Well, I'll start off with foundational things that we talked about on our triangle based on tier 1. What are we doing for all students? The curriculum, the SEL curriculum that we use in the classroom, and then the social interactions with peers and adults. Having seen kids come into our district with lacking social skills, and then seeing that student a year or 2 years later with the skills they develop is a good example of why it's critical that kids have those opportunities to interact and we have a curriculum to help support them. So that's one thing. So that's the preventative kind of thing that we need to be doing. In terms of bullying, we rely heavily on our principals and the consistency there in terms of managing those situations when they occur. And those can be real challenging things to manage at times. And we see that in all of our schools. So to me, it's kind of a difficult question to answer for you.
But there is protocol to follow with harassment, intimidation, and bullying that our principals do follow. And then part of that follow-up could be restorative, right? What does that look like? How do we learn from this experience? And of course, like you're saying, from kindergarten through 12th grade, those experiences look different, or those behaviors. But we have to remember these are kids coming to school, and part of our responsibility is to help them learn. Granted, if it's a repeat, right, that's part of that harassment, intimidation, bullying, and then that's a different plan to support the learning.
No, I can see that. The last comment I had was thinking about your presentation and our discussion on having each student have a caring an adult that they know cares for them. I was saying, I wouldn't be here tonight if there hadn't been a teacher who had cared for my father. His brother didn't have that. That whole side of the family went one way, the other went this way. And there was one person at Seaholm High School in Bellingham made the difference between two whole families' direction. So it shows how important a teacher can be long after all that generation's all gone. Anyway, thank you so much. I know you're both very dedicated to this and work inspiring teachers, and teachers inspire you.
Definitely.
We're raising the whole child. It's the whole child that will succeed, and not just the narrow set of learning objectives.
And that ripple, right? It's like throwing the stone into a pond. It's not just that student, it's those generations or their friends.
And it pays back our community over time. right? That care that we invest in our young people, you hope that makes them more stable, caring, productive members of our community moving forward. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. So next up, we have Nick presenting the finance report.
Yeah.
This,
Your presentation to.
Alrighty, so unfortunately, Washington County Treasurer changed our financial tracking system that we rely on to give you these updates. And with that transition, not only did the reports come out late, but they had what Brian and some of our colleagues at the ESD identified as some errors as well. So rather than giving you our best guess right now, we're gonna hold off on sharing updates from December simply because we want to ensure they're accurate before we do. But what Brian has committed to doing is sharing with you all via email as soon as they're ready. And then in February, we'll just do 2 months worth. We just want to make sure we had accurate stuff before we shared it out. So since we don't have much financial stuff to talk about month to month, we're gonna talk more about budget checking in for this year, and then also transition into some budget development for 25-26. So we're on track to have, a balanced budget as we adopted that budget of back in July or June or July, that positive balance of 40, back then it was 41,000, now it's 43,000. We're spending more than we expected though. That's because the commitments that I made with as far as increased staffing was around student staff safety. So we've had some, as safety concerns arise, we can't simply ignore those. Those take staffing to address.
is that like temporary staffing or is it?
So it takes different forms. It depends on the type of staffing it is. Classified, you can certainly do some temporary staffing because of the nature of the laws around that hire. Certificated staff, when you bring them on, you are committed to keeping them on through the year, and you must communicate to them by a certain date, May 15th, whether or not. So for the most part, it is temporary. A lot of the support staff we brought on has been classified. And so, however, the needs may not be temporary. So,
Right.
we'll keep reviewing that as we go.
You'd probably be interested to know if there was a permanent hire need
Yeah,
on the certificated side, I guess.
yeah, certainly. And, I think anytime we look at the consent agenda that has the personnel moves there. So just keep your eyes there, and I can also make sure I communicate those proactively ahead of time to you guys. Then revenue is up, is gonna be up because of our enrollment is higher than what we had budgeted back when we adopted the budget. There's a few variables out there though, as far as safety net. Ian and his team work hard to apply to receive funds for some of the students that have significant supports, that need significant supports that come at a cost.
Could you explain again what the safety net is?
Sure, yeah. Safety net is when a student is identified to have a certain level of needs that require a certain level of resources that are higher than other students in our system. We are eligible from the state to apply for some funds to recapture some of the costs.
Okay.
So similarly, transportation safety net, as you know, one of our priorities right now with the legislature is to fully fund transportation. A quick fix the legislature has done the last couple of years to try to mitigate that before they actually solve it is to provide opportunities for us to try to claim transportation what we're underfunded by. So the state has identified that we're eligible for $500,000 in transportation safety net. Today we worked to submit our application for that, and we submitted. We were able to, through our accounting, claim up to about 475,000 of that. That won't get fully funded because there's like 13 million or 14 million to go across $80 million worth of underfunding. So our experience the last couple of years has been that we get about 50% of that. Again, a variable we don't quite know right now. But the biggest piece is that there's no significant outliers in revenues or expenditures to this point.
And just with spending more, with adding the staff due to higher enrollment, I guess kind of a catch-22, right? But that also means our numbers are going to be better with the students than we budgeted for.
Yeah,
On that side.
yep. We've added some staff to create some sections at the secondary campus as well, just because we've run out of space. We've run out of ways for students to get to class, quite frankly, because there's just not room. And again, like you said, Jason, that coincides with a higher level of enrollment than we had budgeted for. So that's a plus there.
What's the rough balance between revenue and expenditure on those changes?
I think the best guess we can put at that is Brian performs what he refers to as a budget scrub, which is just consistently looking at different things. And so looking at that 43,000, I would say, we're projected to add 43,000 at the end of this year to the fund balance. So knowing that those adds we've made have pretty much evened out with the increase of student enrollment. I'm gonna let you think for a second. Look like you had a question.
We haven't added or subtracted from the 43,000. Expenses are higher, revenues higher.
I'm still back on the
Okay.
transportation safety net.
Sure, yeah.
About when do we anticipate hearing back about what we applied for?
Yeah, pretty soon. That application Brian turned it in today, and we will hear back next month what that amount is. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we don't know.
Mhm.
But historically, we've gotten about 50% of what we've asked for. We've
Mhm.
asked for about 400,000.
This
Is that correct?
this year we asked for about 472.
72 more than I
Yeah.
wrote down. Okay, so we could be getting a couple $100,000.
Mhm.
Could be,
Could be.
might not be. But is that in excess of what we budgeted for?
Correct. Yeah, there's no new, knock on every piece of wood you can find, there's no new anticipated costs associated with that revenue.
So
Because
that
that revenue is to cover costs we've already committed to for the year.
we've already budgeted for.
We didn't budget for, well, I guess technically, yes, we budgeted for some of it we didn't. It captures things like a bus aid for a student who had needs we might not have anticipated. So some of these pieces were budgeted for, but some were unknown.
Okay, so it's not like we're expecting to get a couple $100,000 extra that's just added to our fund balance. This would help cover some unanticipated costs.
The way the budget has been developed, that money coming in would be added to the fund balance.
Okay.
Yep.
So a potential for a positive. Wonderful.
Good clarification.
That's why my brain.
Yeah.
I looked all screwed up in my.
Yeah, it'll be added to the fund balance. However, some of the expenditures were not in the original budget, so.
And that's why Brian's continually doing those
Right.
scrubs and trajectories, because we still are budgeted to end the year. I mean, moderate gain of 43 is essentially neutral.
Yeah.
But still, that we were gonna spend, so that 43 assumes we get nothing for safety net, for transportation
Right.
safety net, right? So any dollar for transportation safety net is positive. Again, knock on wood, the needs right now are staying what we anticipate them to be.
And you didn't, so special ed safety net is apart from these two then?
That first safety net is the special education safety net. I'll need Ian to talk about community impact safety net, 'cause I'm not unfamiliar with that one.
Oh, okay, yeah, the first, okay, that's special.
Yeah.
So with community impact, certain school districts may have, let's say, for example, a group home on, within their boundaries, somewhere in their district. And that particular group home may have, it may focused on maybe, let's say, psychiatric, students who have mental health issues. And so because it's a group home and they may have 20 or 30 rooms, if many of them have, those students have IEPs, there will be a corresponding impact on the school district. And because of that kind of impact, you can submit for safety net reimbursement for that impact. We don't have that here, but we have other variables where we may have students with disabilities in a particular group, let's say if they're impacted by homelessness or something like that. And so we're able to submit to explain the impact in our school district and seek out reimbursement in some way for some of those costs. And I have written for it 3 times since I've been here. It's not an every year kind of thing. The data has to substantiate it. But it's been one that's been, we've been able to get funds each time we've done it. So it's been helpful when we can.
Right, so that was, like I said, that was for this current 24-25, but we also have that simultaneous task of looking at 25-26. So Brian has, and for those of you watching at home, this is in the publicly listed section of board docs. This is the budget development calendar. It's something similar you saw last year. And it's our roadmap for the next few months as we navigate this development of the budget. So I guess I'll give you a moment or two to look through that. So I can bring up my copy here. So as you can see, there's a few yeses already, so we've begun our budget development journey.
So are we gonna be talking about the fund balance target for 4 years today?
We're gonna be talking about the fund balance target discussion, certainly. I don't know what the four-year projection part.
Yeah, I mean, we can get out there, but why the state wants us to project 4 years when they know it's bogus, I'm not still sure, but yes.
So our main priority after we go over this is going to talk about that fund balance target discussion.
For the 25-26.
Yes, exactly.
And we could get out further, we might as well, but.
Yeah, and I can bring it
I
up to
can't make any promises.
This is a very clear timeline. I really appreciate this, and I'm curious what all went into making this, or what all stakeholder groups have viewed and weighed in and make sure that nothing is.
Yeah, so this is a timeline that has been used, actually been used here for a while before Brian and I got here. It was just never, in my experience, never discussed publicly too much.
No, this is what we were asking for, so I think this
Very
is great.
helpful.
Yeah.
It gives a little confidence that we have a process to follow and.
Yeah,
But we've been through this exact process multiple times, so that if it needed to be honed or shifted or changed, that's probably happened over the years.
yep, exactly. And, because some of this is done by law and some of it is in alignment, you look at the referring to our labor groups, that also aligns with our collective bargaining agreement, right? So, yeah.
And will the state legislative process affect this school year, the 25-26 school year, or is it?
Yep, it'll affect our budget development for 2026 for sure. Yeah, and that's why when you see towards the end, I think actually this might be on one of the slides that, last year, you guys were able to adopt a budget in June. That was because the legislature was in the middle of a biennium, so there wasn't as much change. So there's a lot more knowns. This year, it's the first year of a biennium. There's a lot more unknown about what it's going to look like. So sometimes the budget might not be adopted till July because we're just cranking so much on it to try to make sure it's accurate and reflects the needs.
Yeah, I mean, the last time I see legislative updates in May here, so does that mean that?
Because on 4/27, the session should end unless they extend it.
Right.
And then that OSPI needs to take some time to take that those laws, those pieces, and move them through the cogs of the machine that tell us what that means for us.
So how does that work? We've still got that May 1st notification, but we won't have a final budget adopted until later.
That's what's very, very hard about this process. And that's what, it's that balance of causing undue stress, but also, being respectful of those that might be impacted by some unknowns. So there's always a chance every year, this is not unique to Mount Baker, there's a chance every year that a school will issue reduction in force notices simply because it's not reasonable to assure everyone they're gonna have a job without knowing how much revenue is going to be.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that it's very unpleasant to receive a notice, even if you're told, well, it looks like it's not gonna come into effect, but it's a piece of paper that says that.
Yep.
But we've almost always issued more RIF notices than we actually use. The problem only happens if you issue too few,
I agree.
and we've had that happen before.
We sure must have, or we wouldn't be in the spot we're in now. Just a guess.
Any questions about that schedule there, their timeline rather? Okay. And as you guys know, Brian and I are always available for any questions you might have as they come up. Sometimes, yeah, go ahead.
What is the fund balance target? Remind us again for this year.
For this year, we ended last year,
Right.
August 31 of last year, with about 940K as our fund balance. So we're hoping that our budget, what it looks like right now is our budget's gonna finish 43K above.
Right.
So we should be about 980K to end this year, our fund balance. Those numbers right, Brian?
Go on the next slide too.
Oh, next slide, Ed. There we go. Sorry, coulda.
Same thing.
But I want to let you keep going because it's actually pretty close.
Okay.
Sorry, I thought we were finishing up with the discussion.
I know, sorry, no, and I forgot what the next slide was, I guess. So again, that's our estimated ending fund balance for 24-25. It's gonna be that 984. But as I mentioned earlier, there's lots of variables right now, including some potential revenue variables, which are always gonna be in our favor. There's also some cost variables that we don't know about. Well, I guess
The exit binding conditions would be 25, 26.
and so this is gonna be where our discussion starts to circle around with, the next item on our checklist is to have a discussion about what we want, our target fund balance to be in 25-26. So in April of 26, where would we feel most comfortable our fund balance being, as a target? Knowing that, so I'll come back to these, to the two options of 4% or 5%. But knowing that, to reach these targets just this year, there's gonna be an increased cost because of things like unfunded IPD, inflation and collective bargaining agreements, estimated cost increase of 215K. So that's something we do, that's our best guess as far as what our increase, we need revenues to increase by that much at least to cover what our committed costs are gonna be. So that in mind, the discussion that the board has to have, well, the board, I guess has to have right now based on our schedule, is that concept of in August of 2026, is it better for overall for the system to get to that 4% fund balance, which will exit us from binding conditions, or to push harder to get to that board policy of 5%, which would need our fund balance to get to that point. It's not gonna be a formal vote, it's gonna be more of a discussion, and I'm gonna try to ascertain what I think the consensus is here. But knowing, I guess I'll also point out that, if we hold steady with where we're at with our staffing levels, which we've established are at a pretty challenging level right now, we'll be able to exit binding conditions in August of 2026. And at that rate, if we did it one more year, in August of 2027, we get back to board policy.
To 5%.
Yeah,
So we'll hold this discussion formally at our February 27th meeting to give guidance in budget development. That's what this schedule would keep us on.
let me see the schedule real quick.
And there's a February 27th, it says,
Fund balance target.
fund balance target to the boards.
So I think that's for, yeah, I guess that'll be where we make that
So
determination.
we should retouch on this. I mean, it doesn't seem reasonable to go above the 4% at this point, but we can hold this discussion in another month too. And I don't think, at least I'm not gonna change my mind, but
That's fair.
but I think I would be satisfied if we could reach the 4% to exit finding conditions and then take that additional time to get back to the 5%.
And I guess that's what I'd be curious to hear, if you guys
Yeah,
do
we-
have thoughts similar or
I mean, it's
different.
been hard enough to get where we are now.
Yes.
And I'd agree.
I think on the long term, though, 5% isn't enough.
Yep,
I'd like to see it a month.
yeah.
Have a month of funding.
Yeah, and then I think that's a great point. I think that's what we're hearing from OSPI as well, and I think it's a very logical goal to have. Then that piece too, where we, I think the CFO out of Oak Harbor has done a great job as far as advocating and telling the state, okay, if a month of general fund balance, if 8%, 8.5% is what's good, then when it comes time to fund us, the state can't say, look, you already have enough money.
Mhm.
Right? Because I agree with you that we should be 8.5%, and it should be unrestricted. It shouldn't be, we can have a bunch of money in title of child nutrition, but we can't pay coaches with child nutrition or title money.
Right.
So it's gonna be that piece where the state we have to be financially sustainable at that 8.5%, but at the same time, the state can't use that number against us.
Well,
How would they use it against us?
Because sometimes
Oh, they
Olympia,
say, oh, you got plenty of money.
Yeah.
yeah, you don't need
In your
money.
coffer.
Oh, I see.
The
Yeah.
bond,
You take it short this year while we help someone else.
Right.
yeah, so that's the big piece there too. Because I do agree with you. I mean, you look at the way our apportionment works, how it comes in these chaotic troughs and peaks. But that's why a healthy fund balance is important, so you can survive those crazy times.
Right.
yeah, the recommended fund balance should be built into prototypical school model, which I think needs to be divided by district size, both geographically and numbers.
Yeah. So
that it's we definitely need improvements to the prototypical school model to.
Next thing, binding conditions also require that we were meeting our own board policy.
Originally it was, they changed it because I think it's a fair, characterization of it. They were pleased with the work we've been doing.
Mhm.
And so they're willing to change it, to move it away from board policy to 4%. Yeah. I actually met with them today, and it was a meeting where Brian and I spoke the most because I think again, they feel comfortable with where we are. I mean, they know there's still a long ways to go, right? We're not jumping up and down right now, but our sustainability is looking better.
Right.
So I think to try to characterize WASDA's goals for this legislative session would be our three main items that, transportation, special ed, and MSOCs would amount to somewhere around $350 per student to fund. I mean, that's the best estimate I've heard, which would give us over $500,000 if they did that. I'm not counting on it, but that's our main push as far as the legislative increase in funding, and like like you're mentioning, we've got the other step increases, the inflation and stuff going on at the same time.
That's
So
exactly right.
what would meet the current deficit is not gonna meet the next year's deficit.
Right,
Yeah.
So it's a,
that's concerning. Our students, so our per FTE amount per student is what, about 12,500, is that right?
That's usually the number we've been kicking around.
And so an additional $300 per student of that.
350.
$350 per student of that, no, I mean, that's not asking for a huge increase.
Yeah, it's about 375 million statewide.
Well, statewide, obviously. it
Yeah,
goes
so
down,
it
but
would
if
have
you're
to be
looking
done
at-
percentage.
But if
statewide.
you're looking at percentage increase, what is the percentage, what's that percentage? In their head?
Roughly a little bit under a quarter.
So that's not even matching inflation.
Because the state will say that they also have to match inflation. The state will also do that increase as well. So that's gonna be, like you saw the former Governor Inslee's budget plan. He talked about his great, so the funding, ample funding of education. But if you look, his budget proposal, the piece of the pie of education went from 45% to 42%.
Mhm.
Because that maintenance isn't gonna be enough to keep up, like you said, with inflation.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Well, thanks for having that discussion. That's super helpful for our next steps.
Mhm.
And that's what I have for the finance
Cool.
update for this month.
Thank you. That's very good.
Daniel, do you have one more question?
And this is something you could answer later,
Okay.
but I've heard info circulating about state funding impacts to our teachers' salary
Hmm.
or losing their national
sure.
certification.
Yeah,
Is it a bonus or how do you, I don't know what the right word is.
Yeah.
But it impacts their pay.
Yep.
And that sounds like that would disproportionately impact a lot of our teachers because we have so many teachers that have that national certification.
yeah, that's right. What you're referring to is a national board teacher certification. And we do have a high percentage of our teachers do have their national board certification. It's a rigorous process that requires some reflective practices and a lot of thinking about their work. And to support those efforts, the state has given, for a long time, has given a bonus for having that certification. And then also, if you had a certification, also teach at a school that is a certain socioeconomic status, it meets a certain free reduced lunch threshold, you receive another bonus on top of that. And in the former governor's budget proposal, he froze all those bonuses. And Ed has been asking me a fair amount about this, and had a great question the other day that I think it was just salaries without benefits. Our salary, it would impact $375,000 in salary for our teachers.
But it's a pass through.
Correct.
And so if the state reduces it, we don't have to pick up the difference.
That's correct.
The district doesn't have to pick up the difference, but our teachers will still be.
Yeah.
Those with national board certifications will have less.
My understanding that Holly can present to us about that and talk about the importance of those board certifications for teacher retention in our district
She did.
because of those bonuses.
I believe that, yeah.
So I think that's something, I'm not suggesting that we can afford to make up that difference, but that's an impact to our certificated.
I was working on a board comment for that, and then I forgot we don't do board comments.
Okay.
Yeah, digging around and trying to get some information on that.
Yeah.
Well, it would be, if it's reduced, though, it'd be reduced across the board. So the only difference from one district to another is whether a national board certified teacher had an opportunity in one district to work at a high poverty school and then got double they would, that might make it.
So you're saying there's not an incentive to leave?
Well, it's an equal
Reduction.
impact, no matter what district
Yes.
you're at, because if your income drops by 5,000 here, it also would drop for a comparable teacher in Bellingham by 5,000.
Yes.
So it's a wash across.
The problem is that we're not just competing with other school districts, we're competing with the free market, right? And our teachers have skills that are valuable in other jobs, right? So we need to pay people to keep them here.
That, and I guess to be mindful of the compounding stress of a shrinking district of, a shrinking staff with the same amount of workload.
Yeah.
And now add a loss of wage to it. And I've said this before, right? The stress of that, and we're trying to hold this line for the next few years to meet our exit binding conditions and then meet the board 5% policy, that's gonna impact the morale of,
It's a huge deal. It's already impacting you.
and it's gonna continue to,
over people.
yeah, deepen that. And so I just
Right.
wanna call attention to it
Yeah.
and be mindful of it.
And it's hard to be hopeful and optimistic right now, but what I will say is that Gansley's budget has no bearing anymore.
Right.
He's no longer a governor.
Yeah.
It was his idea to pause it, and that no longer has bearing. The new governor does not have a budget out yet. And as we look at legislation that's being floated around, I haven't, sounds like there's, a lot of folks sitting around right now in the finance part.
Well, according to the Cascadia Daily, Governor Ferguson supported this specific budget.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that yet.
250 million.
So as we're advocating for adequately funding,
While we're at it.
and while we're advocating for fully funding schools, our teachers are taking a loss in compensation for expertise and time that they in the past been compensated for, that they worked for. So just,
Yeah, it's a big deal.
I would say that the stress that you're referring to actually falls heaviest on the youngest teachers. Because because of the seniority list, the teachers with the most seniority are not at risk of being laid off in the way that the youngest teachers are. So that's, but I think the best we can do is continue to advocate for that full funding of basic education. Any other comments on finance report? Thank you very much, very thorough, and we'll look for the figures next. Will that be the first meeting in February? What would have been tonight's, or you can do both for the second meeting?
I think we could probably, will the monthly update be done by then, by the first meeting?
Depends if the county can ensure their reports are accurate. I believe there are some inaccuracies on the report.
So if it is accurate, we can squeeze it. in
Yeah,
that first one.
either way,
Yeah.
then whichever, accurate is better
Yeah.
than inaccurate, so thank you. Next up is action items, and we have one action item: approval of the tentative 2025-26 school year date. Nick, you can address that one.
Yeah, so, this is a similar process to we used last year. We will definitely engage with a calendar committee that will be representative of folks from around the district. So pretty much what I'm asking you to approve right now are a couple pieces that have some variability to them. But really, a lot of these are just holidays that we don't have control over. So if you look, the first day of school would be that Wednesday before Labor Day, which again is the pattern we've been on for the last 3-4 years now. It aligns with a couple of our neighbors. Working our way down, looking at that winter break period, aligning again with, I didn't have access to Linden or Nooksack Valley right now, but I assume they will be that same window, same with spring break. So, yeah. Any questions on this?
No, I mean, I'm happy to approve it. I think you know, when we get into the final version that includes the late arrival, again, gonna ask for any data to support that that's to the benefit of the students, and if we don't have that, I'm gonna suggest that we don't do it.
So tonight, we're just being asked to approve this, whether we would approve this broad, you know, kind of the parameters of the calendar. And any other concerns or questions?
Not concerned, but a curiosity.
Mhm.
You mentioned the last 3 school years that we started the Wednesday before Labor
Mhm.
Day. Just if people ask, what's the benefit or the rationale that, how does that help us out?
As opposed to starting after Labor Day.
Yes.
It's funny because it's kind of a mixed camp sometimes. I feel like I hear fewer people talking about starting after Labor Day, but it's still, I mean, I think it's fair to refer to them as traditionalists. They remember when they were a kid, it was after Labor Day. The piece there is, I think, making sure that people aren't feeling like we're going too long into June, I think is another concern I've heard. As far as choosing the Wednesday as opposed to, you know, the Tuesday or the Thursday, because historically before we went Wednesday, this district had been Thursday for a couple years. And sometimes there were some attendance challenges because if you're asking folks to go to school for 2 days on a holiday weekend. Yeah, and so the real simple one here is how well it builds. You start with 3 days, you go to 4 days, and then you go to 5 days.
That's fine.
Yep.
Ease into the pattern.
Yeah.
So if there's no further questions or comments, entertain a motion to approve the tentative 2025-26 school year dates.
Motion to approve the tentative 2025-26 school year dates.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, next up, we have meeting schedule, and the first thing I wanted to mention was we have a Mount Baker High School visit scheduled for January 31st, I believe, at 9 a.m.
That's right.
Does that work for all of you?
I think the only person I'm able to make it was Brenna.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, good. And then I
also did mention to Mr. Durand the desire to at least spend a little bit of time with ASB students,
yes.
knowing they start at 9:30. So
And during this visit, the school-based health clinic, can we,
take a look at it.
I don't, if there's somebody
There
in
shouldn't
there,
be
we.
students in there on a Friday. No. Yeah, we'd have to take a look at
we
it.
can do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that we can hit both of those, and it would be, I think it'd be wonderful to meet with the ASB students.
Certainly.
And if they're anything like the junior high kids, they'll show us around the school.
Uh-huh.
That was very effective. I really got a lot out of that. I also wanted to mention that American Forest Resource Council hopes to have the amicus brief to us tomorrow. We'll see if they're able to finish by then, but they called me today and said that they hope to have it tomorrow. And then at our next meeting, I will try to get the information, have an update on the 6-month pause to certain DNR timber sales in Mount Baker School District. So I've been pursuing that and try to get that information here. So we have an executive session with one item, review of public employee. I think it will take about 30 minutes. And with no decision to be made afterwards. So I think, Tammy, if you want us to, we could sign everything before we start the executive session, then you could be able to finish things up. Nick, I think what we'll do is meet with just the board first and then call you in
Okay,
after that.
call me back in tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Perfect.
that was my plan there. So we'll just, sign the document.
The judge.
We're not
Not
adjourning yet.
adjourning.
We're adjourning to the
Executive
executive
session.
You're on recess.
recess.
Thank you.